Welcome back, Sagittarius. If you're hearing these words right now, trust this, it isn't an accident. Something inside you has grown tired enough to stop pretending everything is fine and wise enough to know you deserve something different. The end of 2025 is not just a date on the calendar. For Sagittarius, it's the moment endurance reaches its final edge. Not to break you, but to wake you up. Before new light can appear, there is a story that needs to be faced, a quiet journey you've already walked, mostly alone, mostly unseen. And it's from that very place that everything begins to change. There is a truth that Sagittarius has not dared to face for a long time. That 2025 did not take your strength away. It only stripped off the old layers you had been wearing for far too long just to survive. And when those layers finally fell away, you suddenly felt exposed, tired, sometimes confused. Not because you became weaker, but because you were forced to grow up in silence. No applause, no spotlight, no one truly asking if you were still okay. Sagittarius has always been a symbol of freedom, the one who believes there is something better beyond the horizon, more meaningful, more aligned with the soul. And yet, throughout 2025, you had to learn how to stand still. Not because you wanted to, but because life demanded it. Responsibilities, obligations, promises you didn't have the heart to break, expectations you didn't want to disappoint. You kept smiling. You kept encouraging others. You kept showing up as strong. But only you knew how exhausted you had become on the inside. There were mornings when you woke up and barely recognized yourself. The familiar excitement was gone. The belief that one more step would change everything was no longer there. At times, you wondered if you had taken the wrong path or if the fire inside you had burned out. But no, the truth is far gentler than that. That fire never went out. It was only covered so you could learn to breathe more slowly, listen more deeply, and understand that moving forward is not always a sign of strength. Losing motivation is not failure. Losing faith is not the end. Feeling like you are no longer yourself does not mean you are lost. It is the moment your soul quietly whispers that an old cycle has finished its work. That the ways you lived, the ways you endured, the ways you pushed yourself to be worthy are ready to be released. Sagittarius was never meant to carry weight forever. You were born to walk forward with your eyes lifted, not with your head bowed in silent endurance. Over the past year, you may have grown used to telling yourself, just a little longer, just get through this phase, and everything will be fine. But deep inside, a part of you became so tired it no longer wanted to try. And that is not shameful. It simply means you have traveled far, given much, and learned every lesson this chapter had to offer. Imagine yourself as a traveler who has crossed the desert for too long. The harsh sun did not defeat you, but it forced you to stop when your water finally ran dry. Not to give up, but to survive, to recover, to remember that the journey is long and you deserve to continue with lighter steps. 2025 was the moment you set your backpack down, not because you were done walking, but because you needed to check what you were still carrying that no longer belonged to you. And in that quiet pause, something very important began to happen. You started to hear your own voice again. Not loud, not demanding, just a gentle knowing that you no longer have to prove your worth through suffering. That you are allowed to live more gently and still be yourself. That freedom is not escaping responsibility, but choosing the responsibilities that do not drain your soul. If, as you listen, your heart softens for just a moment, trust that it is not sadness. It is recognition. Recognition that you are tired. Recognition that you have been strong for a very long time. And recognition that this season of endurance has fulfilled its purpose. A light is drawing closer now, not blinding, not rushed. Like dawn after a long night, soft enough that you don't need to squint. Warm enough that you can believe you will keep going. And as you take a deep breath, letting your shoulders finally relax, you will feel something very clear. You no longer need to suffer to be worthy of this life. From this moment on, your story begins to change its rhythm, slower, deeper, more honest. And in that honesty, destiny begins to move in a very different way. Something very subtle has been unfolding over the past year, and not every Sagittarius noticed it right away. You didn't give up your freedom in one dramatic moment, you gave it up in hundreds of small, quiet decisions that seemed harmless at the time. You said yes when everything inside you wanted to say no. You stayed when your soul was already asking to move on. You nodded because you believed you were strong enough to carry just a little more. And each time, you told yourself the same thing. It'll be okay. Just get through this phase. Just endure a little longer. Sagittarius has always believed in the meaning of the journey. You trust that if a road is difficult, it must be leading somewhere worthwhile. But what you didn't realize is that in 2025, many of those challenges were no longer shaping you, they were slowly wearing you down. Responsibility stacked on responsibility. Obligation followed obligation. Expectations from family, from work, from relationships settled quietly onto your shoulders as if everyone believed you could handle it. And you believed it too. You became so reliable that you forgot what it feels like to be free. The one who always shows up on time, plays the role perfectly, keeps every promise even when it costs you your own truth. There were moments when you knew, very clearly, that you were drifting away from your true path. And still you chose silence, not because you were weak, but because you didn't want to disappoint anyone. You didn't want to disturb the fragile balance others were leaning on. Then came those late nights when there was no one left to impress, no one left to reassure. That's when the emptiness appeared. Not exactly sadness, not quite despair, just a strange distance, as if you were living your own life from the audience seats. You watched everything unfold. You did what was required. But a part of you was no longer fully there. That is the truth that stayed hidden throughout 2025. Not in major events, but in the slow, quiet separation from who you really are. Each time you placed someone else's needs ahead of your own ideals, you convinced yourself it was the right thing to do. Each time you ignored your inner voice to keep the outer peace, you told yourself it was only temporary. But the soul doesn't understand the word temporary. It only knows that you were moving farther and farther away from what once made you feel alive. A question began forming inside you early on, but you tried not to hear it. By the end of the year, that question stopped whispering. It stood directly in front of you, clear, uncompromising. Am I living for my ideals, or am I just trying not to disappoint anyone? This is not a comfortable question, because it forces you to face the truth that many of your recent choices were not born from passion, but from fear. Fear of hurting others. Fear of breaking the image. Fear of being seen as selfish for choosing yourself. Sagittarius never fears difficulty, but you deeply fear being the reason someone feels pain. And that fear quietly locked you into roles that no longer fit. You believed that if you tried harder, sacrificed a little more, everything would eventually balance out. But 2025 revealed an essential truth: there is no balance built on the constant abandonment of yourself. You may have wondered why this year felt heavier than others, even when, on the surface, everything seemed fine. The answer is simple. You lived too long on the energy of responsibility and forgot the energy of purpose. And Sagittarius cannot survive without purpose. You became like an arrow held too long on a drawn bow. Not because you didn't want to fly, but because you believed you weren't allowed to yet. And in the moment you finally admit that you've gone too far from your true self, something important begins to happen. Truth no longer needs to be hidden. It doesn't come to accuse you, it comes to release you. And when you allow yourself to be honest with yourself, even in silence, A strange lightness appears, as if someone has finally loosened the string that kept you frozen for so long. You don't need to answer that question right away. Just allow it to exist within you. Listen to it without judgment. Because in that listening, you begin to remember why you chose this path in the first place. And as that memory returns, so does a familiar feeling. The feeling that you are about to stop living through endurance alone. That a quiet truth is waiting to be spoken, not loudly but powerfully enough to change the direction of your entire life. At a very strange moment toward the end of 2025, things could no longer hold their old shape, not because you wanted to break anything, but because what had been cracked for so long could no longer be patched together. Sagittarius begins to feel a quiet pressure building, like the ground beneath your feet is slowly changing its structure. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, yet strong enough for you to know you cannot stand still one more time. During those days, you may sense that something is reaching its end. An ending that doesn't arrive like a sudden blow, but like a long-delayed confirmation. A decision you postponed for far too long suddenly becomes impossible to avoid. A relationship that once mattered deeply loses its shared language. A job that once felt safe now feels like clothing that no longer fits. A role you've carried for years becomes so heavy that even thinking about it drains you. What's striking is this: none of these things happen all at once. Yet they are all connected by an invisible thread. The thread of truth. The truth that you've been pushing forward for too long in a form of life that no longer fits who you are. And when that truth becomes complete, it stops asking for permission. It asks you to stop. This moment can feel frightening. Sagittarius is not afraid of starting over, but you are afraid of hurting others through your change. You fear the looks of confusion, the questions of why, the feeling that somehow you must have failed. But the deepest gift the end of 2025 brings is not the pain of loss, it is a crystal clear awakening. What is not leaving because you weren't good enough. It is leaving because you have outgrown it. This breaking point does not arrive to punish you. It arrives to cut through a cycle that has held you for far too long. A cycle where you had to prove your worth through endurance. Enduring pressure. Enduring silence. Enduring the habit of putting yourself aside so everything else could remain intact. And in this moment, a powerful realization begins to rise within you. Your value has never been measured by how much you can endure. When a door closes at the end of 2025, you may stand quietly in front of it for a long time. Not because you want to go back, but because you need time to understand what just happened. And in that stillness, a very unfamiliar feeling appears. Relief. Not the loud joy of celebration, but the relief of someone who has finally been allowed to let go. Letting go of responsibilities that were never truly yours. Letting go of expectations that never reflected who you really are. Letting go of a role you played well, but never fully lived as yourself. Sagittarius begins to look back on the path behind you with different eyes. No longer blaming yourself for not trying harder. No longer wondering what if you had just been more patient. Instead, a calm acknowledgement settles in. You tried enough. And if you kept going, you would have lost the one thing that matters most: yourself. This turning moment is not loud. It comes softly, maybe during a quiet evening, or while driving alone, or when you catch your reflection in the mirror and suddenly no longer want to lie to yourself. You realize this: you do not need to prove your worth through suffering anymore. You don't need to strain to be recognized. You don't need to sacrifice your freedom to earn approval. And the moment you see that clearly, a very deep shift begins. You don't need to know the next step yet. You don't need a perfect plan. You only need to know this: from here on, you are not going back to the old way of living. This truth is like releasing an anchor that has kept your boat still for far too long. The boat doesn't have to sail immediately, but it is no longer trapped in shallow water. The end of 2025 becomes a clear boundary. On one side, a past shaped by silent endurance. On the other, a new space where you begin to allow yourself to live more truthfully, even without knowing where it will lead. And the moment you cross that line, even with the smallest thought, you feel a new current begin to form. Gentle but irreversible. As if destiny has been waiting quietly for you to let go, so it can finally guide you toward a different path. One that is truer, more aligned, and far more humane for your soul. After the moment you finally let go of what had kept you standing still for far too long, something very subtle begins to happen. Not right away, not loudly, no fireworks, no obvious sign telling you for sure that you're on the right path. Just a gentle feeling, like stepping out of a suffocating room and taking your first full breath without your chest feeling tight. Sagittarius begins to sense this quietly. You no longer have to tense yourself just to survive. When you stop trying to prove yourself, a new current starts to move silently. Not a rush of opportunities, but doors opening in the most natural way. A conversation that seems casual, yet stays with you for days. An invitation arriving right when you no longer feel desperate to grab onto anything. An idea surfacing while you're relaxed, no longer forcing answers. These moments arrive so gently that if you're not paying attention, you might call them coincidence. But deep inside, you know you are entering a different rhythm of life. New people begin to appear the same way. No effort to impress. No need to over-explain. They meet you in a natural alignment, as if these encounters were arranged long ago. You realize that when you live more truthfully, the right people don't need to be chased. They find you. And most importantly, when you're with them, you don't feel the need to shrink or hold yourself together. You get to be yourself, including the silences, the reflections, and even the dreams you haven't fully named yet. At the same time, your choices begin to change in quality. You no longer choose out of obligation. You no longer choose out of fear of what might happen if you say no. You begin to choose because something feels right for who you are now. There are offers you once believed you couldn't refuse, and now you can smile and say no calmly. No guilt. No explanations. Just a quiet knowing this no longer fits. And each time you do this, you feel yourself returning closer to who you truly are. Sagittarius learns a deep lesson here. Saying no does not make you ungrateful or selfish. It simply means you've grown mature enough to recognize what nourishes your soul and what drains it. When you respect your own rhythm, you stop being pulled by the tempo of the outside world. You allow yourself to slow down when you need to rest when you're tired, and to move forward only when your heart is truly ready. Another quiet shift unfolds. You begin to trust your intuition more than your fear. Before, every decision, big or small, had to be weighed against the worst possible outcome. Now, you still think things through, but you no longer let fear drive. You listen to the first feeling that rises inside you. It doesn't shout. It stays calm, and you begin to notice it is rarely wrong. When you trust your intuition, the road ahead isn't always easier, but it is truer. And that truth makes you feel alive. This is where destiny begins to shift. Not through a sharp turn, but through a gentle change in direction. You are still you, with big dreams, with that familiar spirit of exploration. But now, there is a new softness you carry. An understanding that you don't need to fight life to live correctly. You only need to stand where you truly belong, and what is meant for you will find its way there. There are evenings when you sit quietly, looking back at everything that has unfolded, and you realize you feel peaceful in a new way. Not the peace of perfection, but the peace of no longer betraying yourself. You feel gratitude for what has ended, because without those breaking points, there would have been no space for this new flow to arrive. And in the moment you allow yourself to enjoy this lightness, a familiar feeling returns. A gentle excitement, not impulsive, not rushed, like standing before a new journey, not knowing the exact destination, only knowing you're ready to move again. The light ahead no longer overwhelms you. It's warm enough to trust. And as you walk into that light, one step at a time, you begin to sense that life is preparing a new role for you. One that doesn't require silent sacrifice but invites full presence. And from that presence, your story continues to unfold deeper, wider, and more aligned with the true soul of Sagittarius than ever before. As you take your first steps into 2026, something very different is already waiting for you. Not a sense of urgency, not the fear of falling behind if you move more slowly than others. The air around you feels lighter, as if life has finally stopped pushing you to run. Sagittarius begins to realize this quietly. You no longer need to chase opportunity. What is meant for you does not require pursuit. It requires presence. Some doors in the new year open in a calm, almost effortless way. No need to knock loudly. No need to explain why you deserve to be there. You are invited in simply because you are you. Because the energy you carry has changed. You no longer arrive from lack or from the hunger to be validated. You arrive from clarity, and that clarity makes others trust you. Sagittarius steps into a state of being chosen without competition, trusted without proving worth through endurance, given authority not because you sacrifice more, but because you have grown mature enough to hold power without losing yourself. This can feel unfamiliar if you've lived a long time believing effort must always be exhausting. At first, you may wonder if you truly deserve it. And then you remember you have walked a very long road to learn this lesson. What left at the end of 2025 did not leave an empty space. It created something sacred, quiet, open, a space where new things can land. Sagittarius has always been filled with greater vision when willing to release old patterns. Free from outdated roles, you begin to see farther, not with blind ambition, but with a deep understanding of where you are meant to go. You may notice your goals in 2026 feel different. You no longer want success at any cost. You want success that does not betray your soul. You choose paths that let you breathe, that let you live fully, that allow you to be present with others without trading away your inner freedom. And strangely enough, it is this very choice that leads you to positions of deeper meaning, greater stability. The greatest transformation is not happening outside of you, it's happening in how you see yourself. Before, there were days when you were simply trying to survive, trying to meet obligations, trying not to disappoint anyone, trying to stay upright. Now you begin living in alignment with your purpose. No need to announce it loudly. That purpose reveals itself through how you show up, through the decisions you make, through choosing honesty with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Sagittarius in 2026 carries a quiet, beautiful maturity. The desire to explore is still there, but you are no longer running from yourself. You walk with the awareness that you are contributing something meaningful to the world. Through your work, through the way you touch other lives, or simply through living in truth. You no longer need to prove that you are strong. Your calm says everything. There are moments when you pause and realize you are exactly where you need to be. At the right time, with the right people. Not because you calculated better, but because you learned to trust the flow once you stopped resisting it. You understand now that real power does not come from controlling everything. It comes from listening and moving in harmony with what you know is right. And as you stand in this new space, you feel a gentle invitation from life itself. An invitation to step into the role of someone who no longer lives just to survive but lives to radiate truth, to radiate trust, to radiate a more humane way of living, where success does not oppose happiness, where freedom does not oppose responsibility, Sagittarius knows the road ahead is still long, but this time, you are not carrying the weight of endurance. You are carrying the light of choice. And within that light, your story continues to unfold not as a race, but as a wide, open path where every step holds meaning. And then as you pause within this new rhythm of breath, a very gentle truth reveals itself. You did not come to this earth to be bound to roles that dry out your soul. You were not born to be the one who always carries the weight, always endures, always tries to prove that you are strong enough just to be allowed to stay. Sagittarius came here to live, not to be worn down. The years behind you have taught you many things. They taught you resilience. They taught you responsibility. They taught you how to stand firm even when no one was holding your hand. No need to knock loudly. No need to explain why you deserve to be there. You are invited in simply because you are you. Because the energy you carry has changed. You no longer arrive from lack or from the hunger to be validated. You arrive from clarity, and that clarity makes others trust you. Sagittarius steps into a state of being chosen without competition. Trusted without proving worth through endurance. Given authority not because you sacrifice more, but because you have grown mature enough to hold power without losing yourself. This can feel unfamiliar if you've lived a long time believing effort must always be exhausting. At first, you may wonder if you truly deserve it. And then you remember you have walked a very long road to learn this lesson. What left at the end of 2025 did not leave an empty space. It created something sacred, quiet, open, a space where new things can land. Sagittarius has always been filled with greater vision when willing to release old patterns. Free from outdated roles, you begin to see farther, not with blind ambition, but with a deep understanding of where you are meant to go. You may notice your goals in 2026 feel different. You no longer want success at any cost. You want success that does not betray your soul. You choose paths that let you breathe, that let you live fully, that allow you to be present with others without trading away your inner freedom. And strangely enough, it is this very choice that leads you to positions of deeper meaning, greater stability. The greatest transformation is not happening outside of you, it's happening in how you see yourself. Before, there were days when you were simply trying to survive, trying to meet obligations, trying not to disappoint anyone, trying to stay upright. Now you begin living in alignment with your purpose. No need to announce it loudly. That purpose reveals itself through how you show up, through the decisions you make, through choosing honesty with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Sagittarius in 2026 carries a quiet, beautiful maturity. The desire to explore is still there, but you are no longer running from yourself. You walk with the awareness that you are contributing something meaningful to the world. Through your work, through the way you touch other lives, or simply through living in truth. You no longer need to prove that you are strong. Your calm says everything. There are moments when you pause and realize you are exactly where you need to be. At the right time, with the right people, not because you calculated better, but because you learned to trust the flow once you stopped resisting it. You understand now that real power does not come from controlling everything. It comes from listening and moving in harmony with what you know is right. And as you stand in this new space, you feel a gentle invitation from life itself. An invitation to step into the role of someone who no longer lives just to survive, but lives to radiate. To radiate truth. To radiate trust. To radiate a more humane way of living. Where success does not oppose happiness. Where freedom does not oppose responsibility. Sagittarius knows the road ahead is still long, but this time, you are not carrying the weight of endurance. You are carrying the light of choice. And within that light, your story continues to unfold not as a race, but as a wide, open path where every step holds meaning. And then as you pause within this new rhythm of breath, A very gentle truth reveals itself. You did not come to this earth to be bound to roles that dry out your soul. You were not born to be the one who always carries the weight, always endures, always tries to prove that you are strong enough just to be allowed to stay. Sagittarius came here to live, not to be worn down. The years behind you have taught you many things. They taught you resilience. They taught you responsibility. They taught you how to stand firm even when no one was holding your hand.